Picture this, a quiet trading floor, screens glowing green and red. Everything looks normal, but buried under that silence is something nobody wants to talk about. A pressure building, slowly, quietly, relentlessly. Not the crisis you've heard about, not the one the media obsesses over. Something deeper, older, woven into the foundations of the modern financial system. A cycle that began decades ago and is now approaching a point no one can safely reverse. Most people think they'll see a crisis coming. They believe there will be alarms, headlines, warnings. But history disagrees. Real crises, the ones that reshape empires, don't arrive with noise. They arrive with silence. And this is the crisis they're not warning you about.
Every major financial collapse in history shares a strange pattern. Before the fall comes the calm. Before the panic comes the arrogance. Before the headlines comes denial. In 1929, newspapers wrote, "The stock market has reached a permanently high plateau." In 2007, economists insisted housing prices only go up. And today, you're hearing a new, comforting lie. The system is strong, nothing to worry about. But beneath the surface, three forces, each dangerous on their own, are beginning to merge. 1. A debt supercycle that can't mathematically continue. 2. A slowly weakening dollar caught in a silent currency war. 3. A liquidity structure shakier than it appears. Individually, they're challenges. Together, they're a storm. A storm with no clear center, no single villain, and no easy exit. But to understand this storm, you need to go back, not to 2008, not to the 1970s, but to the moment the world rewired money itself. Imagine the global economy as a massive cathedral, tall, beautiful, built over generations, but the entire structure rests on a single pillar: confidence. Not gold, not productivity, not resources, confidence. Remove that, and the cathedral doesn't collapse slowly, it collapses instantly. Now, let's zoom in to the three cracks forming in that pillar. Crack number 1. The debt supercycle. Think of debt like oxygen. A little keeps the economy alive. Too much turns into fire. Over the last 50 years, governments realized something dangerous. You can avoid short-term pain by borrowing. Recession coming? Borrow. Market wobbling? Borrow. Political promises? Borrow. Debt wasn't the problem. Debt became the policy. But debt grows like a living organism. It needs constant feeding. And here's the part nobody talks about. We reached the point where we borrow just to survive the last round of borrowing. The patient isn't being treated. The patient is on life support, and the dosage keeps increasing. Crack number 2. The dollar's slow decline. Next, imagine the US dollar as a king, not elected, not crowned, but accepted because every other currency bowed to it. For decades, the king ruled unchallenged, but now the subjects are quietly meeting in dark rooms, and the king's grip is loosening. Countries are trading without the dollar, stockpiling gold, building alternative payment networks. No war. No announcements, just quiet exits. Empires don't fall when someone attacks the castle. They fall when everyone silently stops believing in the throne. Crack number 3. The liquidity mirage. Finally, liquidity, the bloodline of markets, the thing that keeps buying and selling smooth, the invisible oil in the machine. But modern liquidity is strange. It isn't stable. It isn't deep. It isn't reliable. Most of it isn't even from banks. It's from shadow structures that vanish the moment markets panic. It's like discovering the water in your reservoir was just reflections of the sky, a liquidity mirage. 3 cracks, 1 pillar, and a system pretending nothing is wrong. Now the story begins. Every crisis has a trigger, a moment. Historians later point to and say, there, that's where the story changed. But here's the truth. The trigger never matters. Not really. The structure collapses because the foundation was already broken. This crisis began the same way, quietly. A tightening here, a liquidity shortage there. A bond auction weaker than expected. A foreign currency swap used just a little more than usual. Small thing, forgettable thing. Things most people scroll past, but then something shifts. A major institution restricts lending. Temporary precaution. A foreign central bank suddenly sells U.S. treasuries. Routine balance. A major tech company announces unexpected layoffs. Strategic consolidation. In isolation, nothing. Together, a pattern. A nervous system firing signals. A body sensing danger before the mind understands it. Then comes the inflection point. A moment when a piece of news, insignificant on the surface, creates an echo. The kind of echo financial historians recognize instantly. The kind of echo that precedes change. You see volatility rise, government borrowing explode, liquidity shrink, dollar dominance question, credit conditions tighten. Nothing dramatic, nothing you can call a crash. Just pressure. Pressure that builds and builds until the quiet becomes louder than any headline. This is how real crises begin. Not with an explosion, but with a whisper. Now, let's walk through what happens next. Not the Hollywood version, the real version. Consequence 1. The squeeze. When liquidity disappears, the system enters a squeeze. Banks lend less. Businesses delay hiring. Investors retreat to safety. Governments borrow more, but find fewer buyers. It's a spiral that feeds on itself. This is why markets suddenly feel thinner, why small shocks trigger big reactions, because the buffer is gone. Consequence 2. The dollar dilemma. As confidence dips, countries diversify faster. They don't dump the dollar. That would be suicide. They simply rely on it less, and every percent of less weakens the king. A slow dethroning. Polite, quiet, gradual, but irreversible. This is the part they don't warn you about. Currency power doesn't collapse violently. It erodes like a coastline, inch by inch, tide by tide, until one day the land you stood on is gone. Consequence 3. The government trap. Facing slower growth, governments do the only thing they know: borrow more. But here's the twist. Higher debt makes investors demand higher yields. Higher yields make debt harder to pay. Harder debt forces more borrowing. A perfect trap, a tightening circle, a mathematical dead end. Every empire in history hit this phase, every single one. The Romans debased their currency. The Spanish drowned in silver. The British stretched their empire thin. The Soviets collapsed under stagnation. Different centuries, same pattern. The pattern that begins with denial and ends with adjustment. Consequence 4. The middle class squeeze. This is where the story becomes personal, because crises don't hit everyone equally. The elite diversify early. Corporations pivot globally. Banks protect themselves. But the average person, the worker, the saver, the retiree, they face shrinking wages, rising prices, unstable jobs, higher taxes, weaker safety nets, disappearing opportunities. The system corrects itself on the backs of those who didn't break it. That's the quiet injustice built into every financial reset.
Consequence 5. The silent reset. Eventually, the system reaches a point where the old rules no longer work. Then comes the reset. Not announced, not televised, not voted on. A silent shift in the architecture of the economy. New money frameworks, new trade alliances, new currency structures, new power centers, new winners, new losers. And when the dust settles, the world looks familiar, but different. The same buildings, the same markets, the same institutions, but underneath a new operating system. The crisis they never warned you about becomes the world you live in. History never repeats itself perfectly, but it rhymes with unsettling accuracy. Every debt cycle, every currency shift, every liquidity crunch, every empire caught in its own contradictions. The signs were always there. Most people just preferred not to look. Human beings fear change, but the economy doesn't care what we fear. It moves according to forces older than any nation, older than any politician. Cycles don't ask for permission, and crises don't wait for warnings. The question isn't, can this be stopped? The real question is, will we recognize it before the next chapter begins? Because if history has taught us anything, it's this: the biggest dangers are never the ones shouted from rooftops. They're the ones happening quietly while everyone feels safe. So, let me ask you something. Which part of this cycle do you think we're in right now? The calm, the cracks, or the beginning of the reset? Drop your answer below. It will be interesting to see how many people are actually paying attention.